Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Diving into the world of Harry Potter is like walking through a twisted labyrinth where the walls whisper secrets and every new turn reveals either an answer or another mystery. The book series gave us many answers but far more questions, and the ending, alas, was not a period, it was an ellipsis. Yes, over the years J.K. Rowling has offered many explanations, and yet some of the canon's mysteries remain in the shadows. Today, I invite you to step into those shadows with me. Be warned, logic holds no power here. Let's dive into what still baffles even the most loyal fans. Enjoy the video. Number 1. How does Colin Creevey's camera work? Colin Creevey, the ever-smiling first year with a camera always around his neck. He practically stalked Harry, shouting, "Harry, say cheese!" And no one seemed to ask the real question, how does a Muggle camera even work inside Hogwarts? In the 4th book, we're told outright, Muggle electronics fail at Hogwarts due to the magical saturation of the castle, yet Colin's camera kept working. Was it enchanted? Homemade? Or, dare we say, did Colin secretly outwit Dumbledore's spells with his own genius? If so, why didn't he become Britain's top magical engineer instead of dying so young? Or are we simply overestimating J.K. Rowling's attention to detail? Number 2. Why didn't Dumbledore ensure Harry had a decent childhood? Yes, we know, Dumbledore protected Harry by hiding him with his aunt, blood magic from Lily and all that. But what about basic care? Why did the greatest wizard of his age, leader of the Order of the Phoenix, not even hint to the Dursleys that mistreating Harry might have consequences? Why did he allow Harry to live in a cupboard, unloved and afraid? What if, instead of becoming the savior of the magical world, Harry had become its destroyer? What if it was Dumbledore's neglect that sowed the seeds of darkness in his heart? Number 3. What do wizarding children do before age 11? When Hagrid handed Harry his Hogwarts letter, the boy had no idea magic was even real. Understandable, he was raised by Muggles. But what about purebloods? The Weasley kids, for example, did they just sit at home until 11, studying algebra with mum and replacing arithmetic with cauldron tricks? We never see any preparatory schools, no ministry-run programs, which means 11-year-olds arrive at Hogwarts with wildly different levels of education. Some can read, some can brew potions, some just found out magic exists. Is that fair? And how do the teachers even manage such chaos? Number 4. Why does Harry still wear glasses? Glasses are Harry's trademark look, but in a world where statues can come to life and time can be stopped, why has no one fixed the boy's eyesight? Sure, maybe it's a symbol, a tradition, a touch of charm, but Harry is a seeker. His life literally depends on vision. One wrong move and he's crashing to the ground. Spells like Oculus Reparo fix the frames, but not the vision. Are there no wizarding eye doctors at Hogwarts? Or does Harry cling to his glasses as a reminder of his Muggle heritage? Number 5. How did Draco Malfoy become Snape's favorite? Severus Snape, the most complex character in the saga. His hatred of Harry is understandable. The boy reminded him far too much of James Potter. But here's the mystery. Why it was Draco Malfoy Snape's favorite? Cold, arrogant, cruel, Draco was arguably more like James than Harry ever was. And yet Snape forgave him everything. He took points from Gryffindor for the tiniest infractions, but turned a blind eye to Draco's schemes. Was it pure politics? Did Snape see a version of himself in Draco? Or did he simply love Draco's parents? No answer, only speculation. Number 6. What happened to Sallyanne Perks? Sallyanne Perks, a name mentioned once. The Sorting Hat called her name right before Harry's, but then she vanished. Not just from the page, from existence. No lessons, no exams, no student lists. She didn't show up for Owls, wasn't seen in the Battle of Hogwarts, not even a whisper in Half-Blood Prince. What happened to Sallyanne Perks? Did she transfer? Drop out? Become a ghost? Or, most likely, did Rowling just forget she existed? Number 7. How is a Horcrux made? We know Horcruxes are the embodiment of evil. We know Voldemort made 7, but how are they actually created remains a mystery. Rowling admitted in interviews that she devised a method, but editors asked her not to publish it. The reason? Too disturbing, even for the grim tone of the later books. So what was it? Blood rituals, live sacrifices, horrific acts of self-destruction? We may never know, and maybe that's for the best. Number 8. Why didn't the Marauder's map reveal Peter Pettigrew? In Prisoner of Azkaban, Fred and George hand Harry the Marauder's map. Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot and Prongs are proud to present, they say, grinning. The map shows every person inside Hogwarts, every hallway, every secret passage. But for years, Peter Pettigrew, supposedly dead, sleeps in Gryffindor Tower, next to Ron, eats at the table, crawls through corridors, and the map shows nothing. Not once does Harry, or anyone else, see the name Peter Pettigrew moving beside Ron Weasley. But in that very same book, when Harry finally looks closely, the name appears. There, look, Pettigrew, he gasps. The map had it all along. So why didn't Fred and George ever see it? Why didn't Lupin, one of the map's creators, notice his old friend's name? The map showed Barty Crouch Jr. pretending to be Moody. It showed everyone. There's no rule that excludes animagi. So was Peter truly invisible for 12 years? Or was it easier, for the twins, for the teachers, even for the author, not to ask questions no one wanted answered? Number 9. Why aren't kids checked for time-turners? In Prisoner of Azkaban, Professor McGonagall gives Hermione Granger a time-turner. A device that bends the laws of the universe is handed to a third-year student so she can attend more classes. No aura supervision, no ministry escort. Just a quiet warning, you must not be seen. For months, she rewinds time daily, steps into parallel hours, and no one notices. Not Snape, not Dumbledore, not even Madame Pomfrey. What if she changed something? What if someone else stole it? One misstep and the timeline could shatter. Yet no one checks. No one asks. After Azkaban, the time-turner vanishes from the plot. In Order of the Phoenix, the entire stock is shattered during the battle at the Ministry. Like breaking a dozen clocks fixes everything. That's it. No investigation, no ban, no reform, just silence. A device powerful enough to save lives, fix wars, or doom the world disappears without a trace. Maybe the Ministry didn't want people asking questions. Maybe it wasn't about danger. It was about control. Because once you admit time can be rewritten, every mistake becomes a choice, and some choices are better left buried. Number 10. How does the wizarding economy actually function? Molly Weasley clips coupons for second-hand robes. Ron complains about his wand being a bit wonky. Yet food appears out of nowhere, tents expand with a flick, and even a house can be cleaned with one sweep of a wand. In Goblet of Fire, the Weasleys stay in a magical tent that's bigger inside than out. No rent, no utilities. So why are they poor? If magic can create shelter, clean clothes, and hot meals, what do galleons even buy? The books never answer. Flourish and Blot sells books, but who makes them? Ollivander crafts wands, but where do the materials come from? There's no sign of factories, farms, or real labor. And if nothing needs to be bought, the entire idea of currency starts to unravel. Gringotts holds vast fortunes in vaults guarded by dragons. Harry inherits one. But where does that wealth come from? His parents were unemployed. James Potter never worked a day in his life. Yet Harry's vault overflows. Meanwhile, St. Mungo's hospital saves lives for free. Hogwarts educates without tuition. The Ministry runs the entire government, but no one ever pays taxes. In Order of the Phoenix, Arthur Weasley works in a cramped basement office, barely scraping by, while Lucius Malfoy lives in a mansion and influences the minister. The rich stay rich, the poor use hand-me-downs, and no one ever explains how money flows. Maybe that's the real magic, an economy that doesn't need to make sense, because no one dares to ask. Number 11. Why aren't talking portraits considered real people? When Dumbledore dies in Half-Blood Prince, his portrait appears almost instantly in the headmaster's office. It watches, it speaks, it remembers. Later, in Deathly Hallows, Harry turns to that painting for guidance. Do not pity the dead, Harry, pity the living, and above all, those who live without love. That's not a random echo, that's wisdom, strategy, emotion. The portrait feels like Dumbledore, calm, cryptic, powerful. So why is it treated like decoration? Phineas Nigellus Black, the former headmaster, offers his own opinions, complains about students, even mocks Sirius with sharp wit. These are not echoes, they're personalities. He crosses between portraits, gathers intel, reports back. In Order of the Phoenix, he brings updates from Grimmauld Place to Dumbledore. That's not static memory, that's real-time awareness. So how are these portraits not conscious beings? Because they lack flesh? Because they hang in frames? Or is it because the magical world is afraid of what they are? Maybe they are more than memories. Maybe portrait making is a form of soul fragmentation, a mirror of Horcruxes, only without blood, a softer immortality. Perhaps that's why it's never explained in detail. The truth might be too disturbing. What if the wizarding world deliberately refuses to see portraits as alive because acknowledging that means giving them rights, emotions, and power? It's easier to say just paint than to admit that thing on the wall might still be watching you, thinking. Number 12. Why didn't Voldemort use liquid luck? In Half-Blood Prince, Slughorn describes Felix Felicis as a potion that turns an ordinary day into a string of perfect events. Everything you attempt will succeed, he says. Harry drinks it once and walks straight into the answers he needs. The potion makes people speak, paths clear, and dangers fade. If one vial could guarantee success, then why didn't Voldemort ever use it? He, of all people, should have flooded his veins with it before facing death, before confronting Dumbledore, before invading Hogwarts. He planned, calculated, killed, yet never brewed luck. Voldemort knew about the potion. He attended Hogwarts. He studied under Slughorn, the very man who later gave Harry the Felix. Tom Riddle mastered poisons and dark magic. He made Horcruxes, split his soul, and summoned Inferi. Brewing a luck potion would have been child's play, so why didn't he? Maybe he saw it as weakness. Maybe he didn't believe in luck, only in control. But that's not pragmatic. That's pride. And pride, more than any prophecy, was what doomed him. Even the Order never used Felix Felicis in war. Dumbledore had access. He knew what it could do. Why not give a vial to Remus or Kingsley before a mission? Why didn't McGonagall hand one to Neville before the Battle of Hogwarts? Use it well, Slughorn told Harry. But no one used it at all. Maybe there's a cost. Maybe the potion drains something deeper, your choices, your soul, your sense of fear. Or maybe J.K. Rowling simply didn't want her wars to be won by luck in a bottle. But the question still stands. In a world full of dark spells and deadly power, why did no one choose the safest weapon of all? Number 13. Why isn't magical first aid taught in Hogwarts? In the Chamber of Secrets, after being bitten by the giant serpent's fang, Harry lies dying on the floor. It isn't a healer who saves him, it's a phoenix. Fawkes cries into his wound, and the poison fades. But what if Fawkes hadn't come? There was no student trained to help. No one knew what potion to give. No emergency procedure. Ron just stood there, panicking. Even Hermione, the brightest witch of her age, never learned how to treat a magical injury, not even a basic healing spell. The only person with medical knowledge at Hogwarts is Madame Pomfrey. She's brilliant, but she's one. One witch for hundreds of children who duel, fly at high speeds, drink experimental potions, and once faced a live troll in the girls' bathroom. Honestly, I don't know why they even bother sending students here anymore, she mutters after yet another injured student arrives. And she's right. In a school with exploding cauldrons and cursed books, how can first aid not be part of the curriculum? Even Muggles teach CPR to teenagers. But in Hogwarts, you're more likely to learn how to turn a hedgehog into a pincushion than how to stop magical bleeding. In the Goblet of Fire, Cedric Diggory dies in front of Harry, just like that. No one knew what to do. They stood around a dead boy, frozen. "He's back, Voldemort's back," Harry says, but the crowd only stares at the body. No emergency healers, no trauma response. What if Cedric hadn't died instantly? What if someone knew a stabilizing charm or an anti-curse potion? Hogwarts trains warriors, but not medics. The world of magic has endless spells, yet it never taught its children how to save a life. Number 14. Why isn't there mass protection against Dementors? In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry faces a creature so terrifying it makes him relive the screams of his dying mother. "I can hear her screaming," he whispers, trembling, as the Dementors hover closer. These beings don't just frighten, they drain the very soul. And yet, the wizarding world treats them as allies, guards of Azkaban, weapons of fear. No magical creature has such unchecked access to human emotion, and still there is no national defense system, no wards, no protective artifacts against them, just a single spell, the Patronus charm. But the Patronus isn't easy. It took Harry months of training with Lupin to produce a corporeal one. Even then, most adult wizards can't do it. During the Battle of Hogwarts, when Dementors descend on the school, Professor McGonagall doesn't conjure a Patronus, nor does Slughorn. Only Harry, Ron, and Hermione step forward. "Expecto Patronum!" echoes 3 times, against dozens of soul-suckers. Where was the Ministry's emergency plan? Why didn't Hogwarts have enchanted barriers, silver amulets, or even potion-based resistance? This failure isn't just negligence, it feels deliberate. Fudge, Scrimgeour, and even Thickness, each Minister of Magic allowed Dementors near civilians. In Order of the Phoenix, 2 of them attack Harry and Dudley in Little Whinging. It was a message, fear as a tool of control. Dolores Umbridge even orders them without authorization. What if that's the point? What if the lack of protection is the real protection for the people in power? It's easier to rule when everyone is cold and afraid. Dumbledore knew the truth. "You place too much importance, and you always have done, on the so-called purity of blood," he says to Fudge. But maybe the real issue isn't blood, it's fear. The system doesn't protect people from Dementors because it needs Dementors to scare, to punish, to silence. A Patronus takes hope, focus, and love. But maybe that's exactly what the Ministry wanted to keep locked away. Number 15. What is the veil in the Department of Mysteries? The veil in the Department of Mysteries stands as one of the most haunting enigmas in the entire Harry Potter universe. Tucked away in the Death Chamber deep within the Ministry of Magic, it is described as an ancient archway, tattered with a thin, fluttering curtain, suspended in the silence of a stone amphitheatre. The room itself exudes stillness, and yet the veil rustles as if caressed by an invisible wind. No spell moves it, no draught explains its motion, and yet it moves. When Harry Potter and his companions first enter the chamber in Order of the Phoenix, it becomes immediately clear that the object is not ordinary. Luna Lovegood, with her uncanny intuition, claims she hears voices behind it. So does Harry, but others do not. What makes some hear the whispers, while others hear only silence? Sirius Black's death remains a turning point, not only for Harry, but for readers. The moment is abrupt, irreversible, and deeply perplexing. Bellatrix Lestrange casts a curse, not Avada Kedavra, not a clearly defined spell, and Sirius staggers, then falls through the veil. There is no explosion, no final breath. He is simply gone. He fell through the archway and disappeared behind the veil, which fluttered for a moment as though in a high wind, and then fell back into place. That's all we're given. The absence of a body, of any physical aftermath, leaves a void not just in the world but in our understanding. It was not merely that Sirius died, it was that he was swallowed. Why does this thin curtain seem to carry such immense power, and yet is left with no warning signs, no barriers, nothing to indicate that a single misstep will end a life? The veil, situated in a room with benches and steps as if spectators once gathered to witness its use, hints at ancient rituals. Was it used for executions? Or something worse, something more arcane, something tied to the very nature of death? The Ministry's decision to store such an object in a publicly accessible corridor of their Department of Mysteries feels reckless at best, sinister at worst. The Unspeakable's work here, studying the great forces of the universe, time, space, thought, love, and death. But even among these incomprehensible fields, the veil stands out as uniquely unknowable. There is no mention of protective enchantments, no magic cordoning it off, no plaque or explanation. Hermione Granger, brilliant and cautious as always, warns the others not to go near it, but even she cannot explain why. She is afraid of it, instinctively, but cannot articulate the rules that govern it. For something that annihilates a person's existence so completely, its lack of containment raises troubling questions. Why isn't it locked away? Why are students able to stand within feet of it? Is the Ministry careless, or is it hiding something more? The possibility that the veil is a boundary, a literal frontier between life and death, gains credence from its behavior. "It's just an archway," says Hermione, but Luna replies, "I can hear them too." The whispers suggest that something lies beyond. This is not a wall or a coffin, it is a threshold. In mythology and folklore, the boundary between worlds is often thin, a veil separating the living from the dead. The fact that Harry and Luna, who have both experienced death closely, can hear voices while Ron and Hermione cannot, suggests a psychological or emotional sensitivity, a tether to the other side. What lies beyond the veil? Is it the afterlife, a liminal space between realms, a trap for souls, or a passage for them? In the tales of Beedle the Bard, death is personified as an entity that waits patiently for all. The resurrection stone in the Deathly Hallows brings echoes of the dead, not true resurrections, and yet those spirits are ephemeral, vague. The veil, by contrast, feels immediate and irreversible. When Sirius falls through, there is no sign that his spirit remains. He doesn't appear later through magical means, not even as a ghost. As nearly headless Nick tells Harry, only wizards who are afraid to go on choose to remain as ghosts. Sirius, bold and unafraid, clearly did not hesitate. Yet the question remains, why was Sirius's death so instantaneous? Was it the spell or the veil that killed him? Bellatrix's curse might have weakened him, but it was the veil that consumed him. No blood, no body. It was not Avada Kedavra, because the green flash is absent. Whatever she cast, it pushed him into the veil. The implication is that one does not need to die before entering. The veil does the rest. It is not a metaphor, it is not symbolic, it acts. And it acts with finality. Could the veil be an ancient magical construct, a relic from a time when magic was raw and undefined? Its age is never clarified. The Department of Mysteries is filled with experimental and dangerous artifacts, time turners, prophecy orbs, enchanted brains, but none as singularly final as this. There are no records about its creation, no magical texts discussing its origin. Even Dumbledore, who seems to know almost everything, does not speak of it in detail. That silence is louder than words. If even he is cautious or ignorant, it means the veil predates modern magical understanding. The archway itself evokes Roman and Greek architecture, reminding us that wizards existed during those times too. Could this have been a gate used by ancient wizards to commune with or control death? If so, why did that knowledge vanish? Or worse, was it buried? The Ministry's reluctance to discuss it, its decision to leave it exposed, may indicate fear rather than knowledge. Perhaps they know the veil cannot be moved. Perhaps attempts to destroy it have failed, or perhaps they do not dare try. Number 16. Why is Avada Kedavra never tracked? In a world governed by wands and wonders, one spell stands alone as the purest embodiment of magical evil, Avada Kedavra, a curse with no counter-curse, a beam of green light that signals only death. And yet, within the very fabric of J.K. Rowling's meticulously constructed wizarding world, one baffling question pulses like an unanswered riddle. Why is there no system that tracks its use? This is not a minor oversight. This is a fundamental contradiction buried in the heart of magical law. Avada Kedavra is unforgivable, illegal, and inescapably final, and yet somehow invisible. The Ministry of Magic monitors underage sorcery through the trace, a magical signature that alerts officials if a minor casts a spell outside school. Harry experiences this early on in the Order of the Phoenix, when a Patronus charm used to save Dudley results in an immediate threat of expulsion. "You are hereby expelled from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry," the letter begins. Within minutes, the Ministry acts. Yet when Voldemort murders charity worker Frank Bryce with Avada Kedavra in Goblet of Fire, there is no alarm, no oral response, no ripple in the official system. Frank simply dies, forgotten, unnoticed. This discrepancy is not limited to isolated moments, it's a structural flaw. During the First and Second Wizarding Wars, the killing curse is used freely and frequently. Voldemort, Bellatrix Lestrange, Antonin Dolohov, and countless Death Eaters wield it with a terrifying sense of impunity. In Deathly Hallows, Voldemort launches the curse at multiple targets in the Battle of Hogwarts. Fred Weasley, Remus Lupin, and others fall to its green glow. And yet there is no suggestion of magical detection, no enchanted registry, no internal ministry alarm bell ringing at each act of cold-blooded murder. The question looms large. If underage magic can be tracked, why not the ultimate crime? Why is there no detection system tied to Avada Kedavra when its use is punishable by a lifetime sentence in Azkaban? In Goblet of Fire, Barty Crouch Jr., posing as Mad Eye Moody, performs all three unforgivable curses in a classroom, and no one at the Ministry even senses a violation. The castle remains untouched by official inquiry. Not even Dumbledore, a legendary wizard with high-level access, makes mention of any magical system that monitors such acts. The implication is terrifying. These curses exist outside surveillance. When Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban, the Ministry mobilized instantly, sending out Dementors and alerting the public. Cornelius Fudge used every magical means available to locate a single man, and yet, when Dolohov executes murders with Avada Kedavra, there's silence. In Half-Blood Prince, Draco Malfoy uses the Imperious Curse on Madame Rosmerta and later attempts to kill Dumbledore. None of it is detected, and when Severus Snape casts the killing curse atop the Astronomy Tower, murdering the headmaster of Hogwarts, the Ministry remains unaware. No magical system registers the death, no investigators appear. Dumbledore's death is mourned by those who see it, not those who should have known. The philosophical ramifications are deep. Magic in this world is not just power, it's bureaucracy. There are laws, protocols, offices, departments, and yet the most dangerous act of all, one that ends a life instantly, remains untraceable. Why? Are the tools not available? Or is it, perhaps, a willful omission? The books hint at this fear subtly, never addressing it head-on, but always circling the edges. The unforgivable curses are called that for a reason. Their use is not discouraged, it's criminalized. Yet without a detection mechanism, how is that law enforced? On trust? The contradiction becomes even starker when one remembers Priori Incantatem, a spell that reveals the last spell cast by a wand. In Goblet of Fire, Amos Diggory uses it to identify the dark mark conjured by Winky using Harry's wand. If such a spell exists, then surely it could be adapted to automatically register fatal curses, and yet there is no indication of such enforcement. The law relies on witnesses, confessions, or post-mortem inspections. Magic, so omnipotent in its capabilities, fails to police itself at its most critical junction. Consider the case of Tom Riddle's first known murder, that of his father and grandparents. Avada Kedavra was likely used, but the Ministry never investigated. Even when Dumbledore suspects him, there is no forensic trail, no magical residue, and that too is a mystery. Why does Avada Kedavra leave no trace? Other spells, such as the Cruciatus Curse or even stunning spells, can be identified. But this one, the deadliest of all, is like a ghost, clean, quiet, invisible. When Harry uses the spell in the final book, attempting to duel Voldemort in the final battle, there is no consequence. No aura later questions him. No inquiry into who used the unforgivable curse inside the most sacred place in Wizarding Britain. It simply fades into the background of war. The law, it seems, bends when war breaks out. But should the integrity of magical detection really collapse when it's most needed? The Killing Curse's peculiar legal status is not the only oddity. Its accessibility is troubling. There is no ritual, no rare ingredient, no forbidden book required. Any wizard or witch who desires it can simply say the words Avada Kedavra and cast the spell if they have the power. Moody, or rather Crouch Jr., demonstrates this in class. Even Neville Longbottom, a nervous student, witnesses its mechanics, and the Ministry is aware of this. They know that knowledge spreads. So why no safeguards? Why no wand-specific restrictions? Why no enchanted register to flag any wand that casts the curse? Number 17, why don't students learn Apparition sooner? Of all the strange choices made by the magical education system in the world of Harry Potter, few are as bewildering as the prioritization of broomstick flying over the far more powerful and practical skill of apparition, known in the wizarding world as transgression. At the tender age of 11, Hogwarts students are expected to mount a broomstick, lift into the air, and soar over the school grounds. They are not only encouraged but required to do so. They fall, they twist their wrists. Some, like Neville Longbottom, end up dangling from the castle rooftops, and yet this activity is part of the official first-year curriculum. Meanwhile, the art of apparition, which essentially allows wizards to teleport instantly from one place to another, is not introduced until 6th year, if at all. It is treated as an optional course, a luxury rather than a necessity, and taught only in a handful of sessions, often resulting in failure, splinching, and fear. The disparity becomes even more puzzling when one considers the stakes. Broomstick flying is at best a sport. At worst, it's a high-risk elective that leads to broken bones. Apparition, on the other hand, is a life-saving technique. The Order of the Phoenix depended on it. Death Eaters used it to terrorize and vanish without a trace. Harry himself, once he learned to apparate, escaped from mortal peril more than once thanks to this skill. In Deathly Hallows, it is apparition that saves him and Hermione when they are ambushed by Death Eaters in Tottenham Court Road. Without it, they would have been captured or killed. And yet this essential survival mechanism is not introduced until students are 16, long after they've mastered the game of Quidditch. It's not just a question of age, it's a question of priorities. In Philosopher's Stone, Madame Hooch begins flying lessons by demanding that students shout up to their brooms. It's a whimsical scene, a charming introduction to the magical world. But when we recall that apparition lessons are crammed into a few short weeks in 6th year, and that only licensed instructors from the Ministry can teach them, we begin to see the cracks. The flying lessons are presented as fun, necessary, even foundational. Apparition is portrayed as dangerous, restricted, and borderline forbidden. But why? Why train children to fly but not to flee? The answer, as far as the text reveals, is missing. Nowhere in the canon is there a direct explanation for this imbalance. Professors at Hogwarts never question it. The Ministry appears to enforce it, but no reasoning is provided. In a world where danger lurks at every corner, and where cursed objects, dark wizards, and magical beasts threaten students, wouldn't teleportation be the first thing young witches and wizards should learn? Why teach them how to mount a broomstick before they're taught how to escape a werewolf? Neville Longbottom's disastrous first flight in Philosopher's Stone is a telling example. He loses control of his broom, rises too high, and falls to the ground, breaking his wrist. The scene is played for laughs and introduces the rivalry between Harry and Draco. But imagine the same scene, except Neville had been required to attempt apparition instead. The failure rate, the danger of splinching, all of these might have been far more severe. Perhaps that's the hidden answer. Flying is dangerous but predictable. Apparition, however, is not only unpredictable but irreversible. A badly executed takeoff on a broom may end in a hospital wing. A failed apparition may end in permanent disfigurement. And yet, doesn't that argument collapse under scrutiny? The wizarding world is full of peril. Even minor spells, if misused, can cause long-term harm. In Goblet of Fire, we see a student transfigure another's head into that of a ferret. In Chamber of Secrets, Gilderoy Lockhart removes the bones from Harry's arm. Danger is not a deterrent elsewhere. It is only with apparition that the school and ministry exercise an almost paranoid caution. Why? Because it enables escape. It enables autonomy. It removes the limits of space, and therefore control. Consider how often apparition is used by adults to avoid capture. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore uses side-along apparition to extract Harry from danger. In Order of the Phoenix, the members of the Order use apparition to track Death Eaters and flee when outnumbered. When Fred and George Weasley master it, they use it not just for defense but for rebellion. Apparating inside Hogwarts to mock Umbridge's authority, that detail matters. Apparition is a tool of rebellion. It is liberation, pure and simple. In the hands of a teenager, it would be more than dangerous. It would be destabilizing. That perhaps is the ministry's real fear, not that students will get hurt, but that they'll escape, that they'll stop obeying walls, rules, teachers and corridors. Imagine if every frustrated student could vanish from a dull history of magic class and reappear in Hogsmeade. Imagine if Slytherins could infiltrate Gryffindor Tower undetected, if mischief makers like Peeves had the power to pop into the staff room. Hogwarts as a structure relies on containment. Broomsticks may take you into the air, but they don't take you away. It is no coincidence that Hogwarts is protected by anti-apparition charms. The school is literally sealed against the spell as if to send a message. Teleportation is for grown-ups. This limitation is not just magical, it's ideological. Students are told they are not yet ready for such freedom. They must earn it. They must pass ministry-certified exams, be supervised by licensed wizards, and train under strict conditions. The lesson is clear. Apparition is not just a skill, it's a privilege. But should it be? In Deathly Hallows, Ron is splinched during a rushed apparition. It is Hermione who has mastered the skill that saves him. They are teenagers, hunted by Voldemort, reliant on a spell they barely had time to learn. Their survival depends on a technique that the school system treated as an afterthought. Shouldn't Hogwarts have prepared them earlier? Shouldn't Harry, who faced Voldemort at 11, have learned apparition before 17? Number 18. Why was Hogwarts barely guarded in early books? It begins with a castle, ancient and mysterious, standing proud upon a cliff. Its windows flicker with candlelight, its towers pierce the sky, and its halls are filled with the laughter and footsteps of young witches and wizards. Yet behind the beauty of Hogwarts lies a chilling truth. For all its magic, all its prestige, and all its history, the school seems strangely, hauntingly unguarded during its most dangerous years. The early books reveal not a fortress, but a maze of risks and secrets, where children stumble into death traps while adults appear to look the other way. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the illusion is shattered quickly. A troll walks into the dungeon, not a metaphorical monster, a real one, 10 feet tall, wielding a club and nearly killing 11-year-olds in a girl's bathroom. Not a single enchantment stopped it. The doors were not sealed with anti-creature wards. There was no perimeter detection. The question haunts the reader: how could a creature that primitive yet deadly get inside the most prestigious magical school in Britain? The teachers react not with professional calm, but with panic. Professor McGonagall screams Dumbledore is absent, and 3 first years save the day. It reads like the beginning of a horror novel, not a safe academic year. By the end of that same book, the security situation deteriorates further. An artifact that can grant immortality, Nicholas Flamel's Philosopher's Stone, is hidden within the school itself. No vault, no ministry protection, just a series of traps apparently designed to be solved by 12-year-olds. There's the enchanted Devil's Snare, a game of living chess, and a mirror that reflects one's deepest desire. The dog guarding it, Fluffy, is calmed by music. Not sealed behind a spell, not tethered by an unbreakable chain, but by a lullaby, as if the founders of Hogwarts wanted children to bypass it, as if danger was an invitation. The second year brings no improvements. If anything, the peril increases. A basilisk, a creature so deadly it kills with a glance, is slithering through the plumbing, not even magical plumbing, regular plumbing. Students are attacked, one girl is nearly killed. And yet when Hermione Granger finds the answer, she's petrified before she can share it. Teachers fail to connect the dots. There are no protective spells cast on the bathrooms, no surveillance charms, no magical cameras. The most secure thing they seem to have is Argus Filch, a squib with a lantern and a cat. The creature moves freely without detection until Harry hears it in the pipes. The fate of Hogwarts again rests in the hands of students. At no point do we learn of a defensive perimeter around the castle, no mention of protective enchantments until much later in the series. In the Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore is finally described as laying many powerful enchantments around the school once it's believed Death Eaters may be active. But why only then? In the early books, Quirrell walks in with Voldemort on the back of his head. No alarms go off, no anti-possession charms, no identity-verifying wards. In a world where Polyjuice Potion can be brewed by a trio of second years, shouldn't the castle have had safeguards against impersonation since its founding? The Forbidden Forest, just yards away from the school, is another glaring oversight. It houses werewolves, centaurs, giant spiders, and worse. Students are forbidden to enter, so naturally first years are assigned detention there. Harry, Hermione, Neville, and Draco are forced to explore it in Philosopher's Stone, led by Hagrid and Fang, neither of whom would qualify as a combat-ready force. They encounter a creature drinking unicorn blood, Lord Voldemort, weakened but returning. No guards, no protective patrols, just an overgrown wood, teeming with death. What is most disturbing is that the lack of security is never treated as strange by the adults. Dumbledore, revered as one of the greatest wizards of the age, is often away or simply watches events unfold without intervention. When Sirius Black escapes Azkaban in Prisoner of Azkaban, the school is finally placed under surveillance, but not by trained Aurors. Instead, Dementors roam the grounds. These soul-sucking creatures attack students without warning, nearly killing Harry during a Quidditch match. Dumbledore is outraged, but not because they're untrustworthy monsters. He's angry only when they breach the pitch without permission, as if the real threat were protocol, not murder. One might argue that Hogwarts operates with internal magical defenses too subtle to be seen. Yet the books offer little support for this. In Chamber of Secrets, Lucius Malfoy walks straight into the school, down to the dungeons, and threatens Dumbledore in front of the staff. No authorization required, no screening spells. In Goblet of Fire, Barty Crouch Jr. impersonates Mad-Eye Moody, using Polyjuice Potion for an entire year. No one notices, not a spell, not an enchantment. Not even Dumbledore suspects a thing until it's too late. The school is not just vulnerable, it is blind. This blindness raises questions. Why would the headmaster of the most important school in magical Britain permit such dangers? Dumbledore is not foolish. He is ancient, wise, and deeply strategic. His failure to secure the castle suggests something else. Perhaps it is not failure, but intention. Perhaps the lack of protection is a deliberate test. an unspoken challenge, a way of separating the strong from the weak. After all, the sorting hat does not hide its purpose. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart. Perhaps bravery is the very point of Hogwarts. The Triwizard Tournament, resurrected in Harry's 4th year, confirms this grim philosophy. It is a competition so dangerous it was once banned. Students are maimed, sometimes killed, and yet the moment it resumes, the school places its trust in a magical contract and plunges forward. Harry is entered against his will. No adult is able or willing to extract him. The tasks involve dragons, merpeople, and a maze that literally changes reality. All in the name of glory, and all within the school walls. What Dumbledore offers is not safety, but resilience. He trusts in young wizards to face darkness before they are ready. He lets Harry confront Quirrell, the Basilisk, Dementors, Death Eaters. Again and again, not because there are no other options, but because this is the path he believes Harry must take. Dark and difficult times lie ahead, he says. Soon we must all face the choice between what is right and what is easy. But does he forget that Harry is a child? Minerva McGonagall is no less complicit. In Chamber of Secrets, she gives Harry and Ron a pat on the back for driving a flying car into the Whomping Willow. In Prisoner of Azkaban, she allows Trelawney's prophecies to go unchecked, despite clear mental instability. In Order of the Phoenix, she encourages Harry to pursue defense against the dark arts, even when the Ministry blocks him. She acts as if Hogwarts is more a proving ground than a sanctuary. Even the curriculum reflects this hidden truth. In their 3rd year, students learn about boggarts, creatures that take the form of one's greatest fear. The lesson is taught by a fraud, Gilderoy Lockhart, whose only skill is memory charms. In the 2nd year, students are left defenseless as the basilisk stalks the halls. In their 5th year, the Ministry installs Dolores Umbridge, who teaches only theory. Again and again, the students of Hogwarts are denied real protection. They are made to fend for themselves. The ancient founders of Hogwarts may bear some blame. Salazar Slytherin built the Chamber of Secrets himself, hiding a monster beneath the school. Godric Gryffindor valued bravery above all else. Rowena Ravenclaw prized wisdom and Helga Hufflepuff kindness. But the architecture of Hogwarts suggests that the school was designed not just to teach, but to test. Hidden corridors, rotating staircases, doors that vanish. It is a castle of secrets, not of shields. By the time Half-Blood Prince begins, things change. The school is finally placed under real protection. Auras patrol the grounds, entrance is controlled, yet it comes too late. Dumbledore dies, the Death Eaters enter, and still, despite the efforts, the protections fail. Draco Malfoy smuggles in followers using a vanishing cabinet, a system that had existed for years, never noticed, never secured. Even then, the defenses are porous because Hogwarts was never a fortress. It was a crucible. In Deathly Hallows, this becomes explicit. The school transforms into a battleground. Protective enchantments are finally cast. Protego Maxima, Fianto Duri. A dome of spells layered like armor. But why only now? Why not when Voldemort returned? Why not when children were being attacked? It seems the teachers knew what the students did not. Hogwarts was never meant to protect them. It was meant to prepare them. The price is steep. Fred Weasley dies in the Battle of Hogwarts. Colin Creevey, a mere boy, is found dead on the floor. Lavender Brown is mauled by Fenrir Greyback. The school that raised these students, that tested their courage, ultimately became the battlefield on which their fate was decided. And all of it, every horror, every risk, was built into the foundation, the traps, the forest, the secrets. None were removed. They were features, not bugs. The books never explain this fully. No character turns to the reader and says, Hogwarts was always meant to be dangerous. But every page suggests it. Every absence of protection, every reliance on children, every ghost that lingers in the halls. Hogwarts is not a sanctuary, it is a challenge. The magical equivalent of boot camp, those who survive emerge stronger, those who do not are remembered on the walls. And perhaps that is the darkest magic of all, not the curses, not the monsters, but the silent agreement among the adults that danger is the price of greatness, that survival is the real curriculum, that the lack of safety was never an oversight, but the very design of Hogwarts itself. Number 19. Why don't wizards heal muggles? They say magic is power, that it's limitless, if only you learn enough, if only you dare enough. In the world of Harry Potter, wizards and witches wield wands that can summon healing light, mend broken bones in an instant, regrow lost tissue, and even reverse curses that cause the body to rot from within. But amid all the marvels of St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, an eerie question looms, unspoken and unanswered. If they can do all this, why don't they help muggles? The Statute of Secrecy has stood since 1692 like a towering wall, both literal and philosophical, between the magical and non-magical worlds. Its purpose was to protect, or so they said. But in practice, it became the justification for silence, even in the face of immense suffering. Wizards have the tools to save lives, yet they choose not to intervene. Muggles die every day from leukemia, ALS, brain tumours, heart failure. There are mothers who beg for another week with their children, doctors who cry when they cannot help, and infants who perish in sterile white rooms. Meanwhile, somewhere in London, Madame Pomfrey heals dragon pox with a single vial of potion and regrows bones overnight with Scalegro. And no one reaches out. Dumbledore himself once said, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are." Yet when faced with the choice to act or not act, to share or withhold, the magical world has chosen indifference. Wizards can watch a Muggle child waste away in a hospital bed and justify their inaction because of a law written centuries ago. They wouldn't understand, they say. It's not our place. But laws are not morality. Rules are not compassion. And this choice, more than anything Voldemort ever did, casts a chilling shadow on the heart of wizarding society. The story of Lily Evans should haunt them. A Muggle-born witch, daughter of non-magical parents, born into a world she never expected to know. When Petunia cried out in jealousy and fear, it wasn't only because Lily was special, it was because Lily had access to something that could have changed everything. What if their mother had fallen ill? What if Petunia's child had been dying? Lily had the tools to save them. Would she have been allowed to use them? Or would the ministry have stepped in, wiped Petunia's memory, and let the child die in ignorance? For all the love and light Lily brought into the world, the society she belonged to had lines she could not cross. St. Mungo's, the great temple of magical healing, is hidden in plain sight. Behind an abandoned department store, it's a perfect metaphor, salvation disguised as decay, and behind its enchanted walls healers perform miracles. Arthur Weasley survives a venomous snakebite that would kill a Muggle in minutes. Bill Weasley's face is mauled by Fenrir Greyback, but he's stabilized before sunrise. Even when George loses an ear, the team at St. Mungo's manages to keep him alive through a night of blood loss and magical trauma. Their expertise is astounding, their resources vast, and their compassion, strangely, selective. During the Battle of Hogwarts, wizards and witches fought to protect their own. They duelled, they shielded, they healed. Yet just beyond the borders of the magical world, on the very same night, Muggle ambulances raced through London for gunshot wounds, strokes, and car accidents. No magic flashed to save them. No unseen hand intervened. Invisibility cloaks could have reached any hospital. House elves could have administered cures in the blink of an eye. A simple confundus charm could erase any memory of the encounter. But no one came. And this silence is not born from fear of discovery alone. It is deeper, more unsettling. In The Half-Blood Prince, Slughorn speaks of Lily's talent with potions, her ability to brew cures beyond her years. "I remember her well," he says, "particularly her adeptness at concocting remedies. If one witch in one school could learn to cure with such elegance, imagine what an organized effort could achieve." Magical outreach programs, secret wards in Muggle hospitals, potions slipped into IV bags with a whisper and a vanishing spell. But instead, Hogwarts teaches its students to obligate, to hide, to retreat. The story of Ariana Dumbledore is a tragedy of magical concealment. Attacked by Muggle boys for using uncontrolled magic, she was left broken, her gifts turned inward. Her father retaliated and was imprisoned. Her family vanished into secrecy. But what's often overlooked is what this teaches. When wizards and Muggles collide, it ends in trauma. Wizards fear Muggle violence, and perhaps in darker corners they resent Muggle weakness. Ariana's magic could not save her from cruelty, and so the magical world turned inward, not to protect, but to distance. Healing, like power, became a private matter. Even in the darkest parts of canon, healing magic remains a glowing thread. When Remus Lupin's transformations tear him apart each month, there are spells to soothe the damage. Wolfsbane Potion, a complex and recent discovery, allows him to keep his mind. For a man whom society shuns, he still receives care. Yet what of a Muggle who suffers from schizophrenia or epilepsy? Would anyone lift a wand? The knowledge exists, the spells are known, but the invisible barrier stands firm. Magical lives are worthy of healing. Muggle lives are not. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry visits St. Mungo's and sees Gilderoy Lockhart still suffering from memory loss. Yet he also sees Frank and Alice Longbottom, their minds broken by Bellatrix's curse. Even in the face of magical damage, the healers try. They continue their work, they explore solutions. But when a Muggle loses their memory to Alzheimer's, nothing is done. They are allowed to fade. And the wizards go on sipping pumpkin juice and debating Quidditch scores, while outside another Muggle mother forgets her own son. It is not only the elite who could make a difference. Every Hogwarts graduate learns spells that could change a life. A seventh year like Hermione could brew antidotes, mend bones, neutralize poisons. She could walk into a cancer ward and change fate. Yet even she, with her Muggle background and deep sense of justice, never suggests it. She campaigns for house elf rights, for fair treatment of magical creatures, but never for Muggle healing. It is a blind spot that speaks volumes. Some might argue it is not their responsibility, that the Muggles must solve their own problems. But what does that say of wizardkind? That they see suffering and choose silence? That they possess the cure and offer only excuses? Indifference and neglect, Dumbledore warned, often do more damage than outright dislike. And perhaps this is the heart of the issue. Wizards do not hate Muggles, not most of them, but they do not care enough to help. And that indifference is far colder than hate. In the Triwizard Tournament, we see healing used instantly, reflexively. Harry emerges from the lake with gills and a spell reverses them. A mermaid's bite is soothed in seconds. Cedric Diggory is grazed, and Madame Pomfrey has him upright by evening. These are minor injuries, treated with urgency. So what are we to make of the millions who die of infected wounds in the non-magical world? A healing spell, Episci, could close a gash in seconds, but instead Muggle children bleed out in war zones while wizards sip fire whiskey behind protective enchantments. Consider the curious case of the magical ambulance. It doesn't exist. When Arthur Weasley is attacked, he is transported by stretcher and spells. There are no flying vehicles, no rapid response units. And why should there be? The magical community is small, they can afford to be reactive. But if they were to assist Muggles, infrastructure would be required. Systems, protocols, ethics boards. It would no longer be about helping quietly, it would be about responsibility, accountability, integration, and that, it seems, is a cost too high. Horace Slughorn hoards rare potions and ingredients. Severus Snape creates spells of devastating power. And yet nowhere in the curriculum do students learn about magical public health. There are no courses in emergency intervention for Muggles, no texts on cross-world healing, not even a whisper of debate. It's not just forbidden. It's unthinkable. The magical world trains its youth to become healers for their own, oblivators for everyone else. Even the magical portrait system, which allows communication between frames, could be used to coordinate efforts. A painting in a Muggle hospital could alert a healer in seconds, but the technology is used instead for school headmasters to gossip and pass along security tips. The ingenuity of magic is enormous, but its application is narrow, self-contained, defensive, always inward. In the Deathly Hallows, when Harry visits Godric's Hollow, he sees the graves of his parents. "The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death," reads their headstone. Yet wizards have delayed death for centuries. Nicholas Flamel lived for over 600 years. Phoenix tears can revive the dying, but the magical world has made a decision. Only their kind may benefit. Death for Muggles is not the enemy. It is inevitability, and no one challenges that verdict. The Flu Network could connect any fireplace. Apparition could transport a healer to the scene of a car crash within seconds. Time turners, though restricted, once allowed students to repeat hours. Imagine repeating a single moment, saving a life, trying again. The resources are infinite. The will is absent. And perhaps the cruelest irony of all lies in the Department of Mysteries. Within the Ministry of Magic, there is a room, locked, secret, never opened. A room that studies the force that binds all things. Love. Wizards study love as a concept, as a magic, as a source of power. But what kind of love heals only those within your borders? What kind of compassion stops at the edge of your kind? The world of Harry Potter is a magical one, but it is not a moral one. It is filled with wonder, yes, but also with silent cruelty. The silence of the Ministry, the silence of Hogwarts, the silence of the healers, the auras, the brilliant minds who could cure, rescue, and change lives, and do not. They do not because they are afraid of exposure, of burden, of accountability. They fear the cost of compassion, and so they stand apart, watching, waiting, capable of everything, and willing to do nothing. Number 20. Why was the Half-Blood Prince never identified earlier? The worn-out cover of the advanced potion-making textbook didn't look like much. To the untrained eye, it was just another artifact of 1,000 bored school hours. But when Harry Potter opened its yellowed pages, something changed. The margins were alive with ink, handwritten instructions that twisted and bent the original recipes, altering them with the casual confidence of a genius. Spells, jinxes, countercurses, improvements, all marked with the moniker. This book is the property of the Half-Blood Prince. At the time, Harry was too focused on the immediate rewards, liquid luck, peer admiration, and a sense of power he hadn't felt before, to stop and ask the obvious question: who had written it? And why didn't anyone else, especially someone like Albus Dumbledore, ask the same? The writing in the book was undeniably brilliant. Take the drastic improvement to the draft of Living Death. The original method required delicate stages, but the prince's annotation advised, "Crush with the flat side of the silver dagger, releases juice more efficiently." That one adjustment gave Harry perfect results. Even Professor Slughorn was impressed, telling Harry, "My boy, you must have inherited your mother's talent." But that's the thing, Slughorn knew Lily Evans. Her potion skills were outstanding. He also knew Severus Snape, who had been top of the class and obsessed with refining potion work. The fact that neither Slughorn nor anyone else made the connection between the mysterious prince and the sullen potion master is one of the strangest logical gaps in the entire canon. Severus Snape didn't just have a talent for potions, he was famous for it. He had rewritten how the subject was taught at Hogwarts, enforcing discipline, innovation, and exacting standards. His style was known, his sharp tone, his cold precision, and above all, his arrogance about his superior methods. They bled through every comment the half-blood prince made. When the prince noted beside one spell, "too slow," add clockwise turn, the tone mirrored Snape's classroom persona exactly. Why then did no one recognize him? The conclusion is inescapable. Either Hogwarts was remarkably blind, or Snape was masterful in obscuring his trail. We cannot ignore the fact that Dumbledore, who kept track of every whisper in the castle, never asked about the prince. He let Harry continue using the textbook without interference until the unforgivable Sectum Sempra spell turned the mystery dark. Even then, Dumbledore never questioned the origin of the book. This is particularly strange because Dumbledore knew the truth. He knew the name Half-Blood Prince came from Snape's heritage, a blend of a Muggle father and the proud prince line from his mother's side. The only explanation is that Dumbledore chose not to reveal what he knew. That silence carries weight. Was it because he was protecting Snape's cover as a double agent? Or was it more personal, a way to let Snape keep his one shred of hidden identity? When Hermione began digging into the mystery, even she hit a wall. She scoured records and found nothing on the half-blood prince. Her frustration showed in her voice as she said, "It could be anyone." But in a school as cloistered as Hogwarts, where generations of students had passed through and every exceptional talent was remembered, it's implausible that no one considered Snape. This isn't merely a plot oversight, it's a character mystery. Snape, who spoke with such disdain for average minds, had clearly gone out of his way to conceal his brilliance behind a pseudonym. Why? One clue lies in Snape's relationship with identity. He lived a life of masks, Death Eater, double agent, teacher, protector. The half-blood prince was his most personal mask, the name he created for himself as a teenager, combining both pride and shame. It allowed him to be powerful without being vulnerable. In that book, he wrote down his best ideas, his private discoveries. Leaving that book behind, forgotten on a shelf, was either an accident or a calculated risk. Knowing Snape, it was no accident. But then the question sharpens. Why would a man so secretive, so controlling, allow his deepest intellectual signature to be discovered by a student he often despised? Perhaps Snape never expected anyone to find it. Maybe he assumed his old copy would gather dust forever, especially after Slughorn replaced him as potions master. Yet the margins of that book aren't written like something discarded. They feel like a message. Not to Harry, certainly. Snape had no love for him. But maybe a message to the world, or to himself, a record that his mind once mattered, that before the war, before the regrets, there had been brilliance untainted by tragedy. The book is not just a manual, it's a diary, a legacy. Another possibility is more haunting. Perhaps Snape wanted someone to find it, not to reveal himself, but to leave behind a ghost, the kind of ghost that teaches better than any living professor could. The book teaches Harry not just potion skills, but decision-making, risk-taking, and responsibility. It builds confidence, but also tempts him into darkness. The spell, Sectum Sempra, annotated with only 4 enemies, is the clearest signal. Snape was not just recording ideas, he was testing morality. And in doing so, he mirrored the exact process he went through as a student, seduced by power, then punished by its consequences. When Harry used Sectum Sempra on Draco, the fallout was severe. Blood, shock, and shame. Snape appeared and healed the wounds, but his fury was volcanic. In that moment, we see how deeply personal the book truly was. Snape wasn't just angry that Harry used a dangerous spell. He was angry that Harry had invaded his past, that he had stepped into the private domain of a boy who once needed to feel important. In the echo of that confrontation, Snape didn't see Harry, he saw himself. The handwriting should have been a clue. Slughorn praised it. others commented on it. And yet it escaped detection. That could only happen if Snape's everyday presentation was a mask. The man who scowled behind his desk was not the same one who wrote elegant notes in the margins. That's the most chilling aspect of this mystery. Snape succeeded in dividing himself so fully that even those closest to him could not trace the parts back together. Not even Dumbledore, who prided himself on understanding the human soul, spoke of the prince. It is as if that part of Snape didn't exist. The danger of the book wasn't just the spells, it was the seduction of power without understanding the cost, and that is exactly what Snape had experienced in his youth. The Half-Blood Prince was his rebellion, his revenge, and his salvation. It was the name he chose when the world gave him none. To see that name rediscovered and used by the son of James Potter, the boy who had everything Snape had lost, was a cruel irony. Yet Snape never confiscated the book until forced to. He let it play out. Let Harry dance with temptation, as if reenacting his own story from a distance. That raises yet another unsettling thought. Did Snape want Harry to learn from the book, knowing the danger? Was he conducting an invisible lesson? A controlled descent into darkness to see if Harry could rise from it? That would mean the Half-Blood Prince wasn't just a shadow of the past. He was a living test, a test of whether power can coexist with morality or whether one must crush the other. The spell repertoire alone should have identified the prince. The non-verbal incantations, the inventiveness, they screamed of someone beyond ordinary schooling. Levicorpus and Muffliato were not textbook entries. They were Snape's inventions, crafted in isolation. That kind of magical creativity is rare. Dumbledore knew a few who possessed it, and yet when Harry used those spells openly, no one raised a brow. It's as if everyone had chosen blindness, either out of fear or reverence, or because the truth would complicate what they wanted to believe. Even when the truth came out, it landed like a whisper, not a thunderclap. When Snape finally declares, "I am the Half-Blood Prince," there is no great moment of revelation, no retrospective unraveling. It simply passes, a statement of fact. But for the reader, that line is seismic because it forces a re-evaluation not just of Snape's identity, but of how carefully he had veiled it. He lived in plain sight, and yet was invisible. A ghost walking through the corridors, never fully seen, never fully known. And so we return to the central paradox. A man leaves behind a book that could expose him completely, and no one notices. In a world filled with portraits that speak and stares that shift, it is perhaps fitting that the greatest magic of all was hiding one's self so well that even discovery led to no understanding. Snape's genius wasn't just in potions, it was in self-erasure, in building walls around his heart so high that even a scream couldn't echo through. Perhaps that's the reason he left the book behind, not by accident, not by oversight, but as a challenge, to be discovered, not recognized, to be read, but not understood, a final riddle for the boy he both protected and resented, a last trace of the teenager who once believed that a name, even one made in anger, could give him the power he never had. The Half-Blood Prince was more than just a clever alter ego. He was a symbol of everything Snape buried to survive, every ambition, every bitterness, every flash of pride that couldn't be spoken aloud. That book wasn't forgotten. It was planted, like a seed waiting to be opened. And when it was, the past rushed out, not with answers, but with more questions. Because the greatest mystery of Severus Snape wasn't whose side he was on. It was how much of himself he ever truly revealed. Number 21, why don't wands detect evil intentions? In the wizarding world, a wand is far more than a tool. It is a channel, a partner, a mirror of the witch or wizard who wields it. The wand chooses the wizard, as Mr. Ollivander famously declared, and this choice has profound implications. Yet there is a strange silence in the magical canon regarding one disturbing fact. Wands do not seem to care how they are used. They respond to power, to intent, to magical compatibility, but not to morality. A wand that once belonged to a kind-hearted protector can serve a murderer with equal efficiency. This unsettling neutrality raises questions about the very nature of magic and about what limits, if any, exist within its practice. When Harry Potter first held his wand, 11 inches holly phoenix feather, he felt a warmth, a surge of recognition, something like destiny. "Curious?" said Ollivander. "Very curious." For this wand shared a core with the wand of Lord Voldemort. Two destinies, two souls, utterly opposed, connected by the same magical thread. It was a poetic twist, but also a warning. If one wand could belong to both saviour and slaughterer, then the wand itself must be blind to good and evil. The magic coursing through it does not ask why, it merely is. And this has consequences. The unforgivable curses, for example, require not only knowledge but intent. One cannot perform the Cruciatus curse without truly desiring to inflict pain. As Bellatrix Lestrange tells Harry, "You have to mean it." And when Harry tries to use Crucio on her, it is weak, ineffective, because his hatred is not deep enough. The magic listens to the soul, yes, but the wand does not resist. It delivers what is demanded regardless of how dark the demand. Consider Peter Pettigrew, a coward, a traitor, a murderer of innocence. He used his wand to betray James and Lily Potter, to fake his own death, to kill Cedric Diggory. And yet his wand never rebelled, never refused him. It was not the wand that guided his morality. It was his own twisted survival instinct. This suggests that wands are not moral instruments. They do not have a built-in compass. They are enablers of power, not arbiters of justice. Even more chilling is the example of Barty Crouch Jr. using a wand to impersonate Mad-Eye Moody, all while torturing students with the Cruciatus curse as a form of education. The wand complied. It helped. It acted as a silent accomplice in a scheme that nearly cost Harry his life. The wand did not sense deceit, nor did it reject the cruelty of its master. It obeyed, faithfully. In this light, the wand begins to resemble something ancient and cold, like fire. Fire does not care what it burns. It can warm a home or destroy it. Wands, then, are like flint and spark. They exist to make magic happen, not to question the hand that strikes. But the mystery deepens when we remember how sensitive wands are to personality. Why would a wand choose someone evil at all? Why not resist? Why not shatter in protest? The Elder Wand is the most extreme example, a wand so powerful it supposedly cannot be defeated in battle. It passes from hand to hand through murder and disloyalty. Michael Grigorovich tried to master it. Gellert Grindelwald stole it. Albus Dumbledore defeated Grindelwald and held it for decades. And Voldemort? He robbed Dumbledore's tomb for it. In this sequence of events, there is no moment where the wand shows reluctance. It yields to power, not virtue. It switches allegiance with pragmatism, not conscience. Even Dumbledore, a man of immense wisdom, believed in the myth of the wand's allegiance. He knew the Elder Wand could be won only through mastery, yet never questioned why such an object would bind itself to death and violence. He once told Harry, "It is the unknown we fear when we look upon death and darkness." But perhaps the real fear lies in how intimately connected magic is to the will, and how little it questions that will. The Ministry of Magic regulates spells, not wands. It is illegal to use unforgivable curses, but there is no law that prevents a wand from doing so. The wand registers spells, but only under duress, such as during underage magic. Adult witches and wizards are free to use their wands without built-in restrictions. Why? In a world so cautious about magical secrecy and control, it seems strange that no magical failsafe exists within the wand itself. Could it be that the very idea of a judging wand is taboo? Imagine a wand that could detect evil intent. A wand that would shiver in your hand if you meant to harm a child. A wand that would sputter if you lied, or freeze if you tried to torture. Such a wand would be a conscience, a voice, a check against cruelty, but that would also mean it could deny its owner. It could become a kind of judge, even an executioner. Perhaps wizards fear this. Perhaps the magical community, long obsessed with freedom of will, has collectively chosen not to create such wands. We must also consider wand lore, that mysterious branch of magical study that even Dumbledore admitted he did not fully understand. The few who master it, like Ollivander, speak of wand compatibility, loyalty, temperament, but never of morality. When Ron uses Bellatrix's wand after the trio escapes Malfoy Manor, he says it doesn't feel right. It's like it doesn't want to work properly for me. That's compatibility, not ethics. The wand didn't reject Ron because he was good. It rejected him because he wasn't its match. So why doesn't magic evolve? In a world where portraits can talk, where spells can simulate life, and where memories can be stored in vials, why hasn't anyone crafted a wand with conscience? The answer may lie in fear, the fear that once a wand begins to think, it might stop obeying. A wand with judgment is a wand with choice. And a wand with choice might decide its master is unworthy. Who would want such a tool? Who would risk being deemed unfit by the very instrument of their power? Magic in the Harry Potter universe often reflects human nature. It is not good or evil by itself. It is an extension of desire. As Sirius Black once said, the world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters. Perhaps magic knows this. Perhaps magic refuses to choose. The wand is not a priest or a prophet. It is a vessel. What we pour into it, love or hate, healing or harm, is up to us. The silence of the wand is the silence of the universe, watching, indifferent, waiting. And yet, there is something poetic in this silence. Harry's wand, so loyal, so uniquely connected to him, refuses to kill. When he disarms Draco, the wand does not lash out. When he stands over Voldemort in the final battle, he does not use the killing curse. He simply lets the spell rebound. Harry's mercy is his magic, and his wand follows quietly. This raises the question, if wands are so attuned to their owners, could a truly good person teach a wand to resist evil? Could a wand over time develop a kind of morality through long exposure to a noble heart? We don't know. The books never tell us. But it's a haunting thought that perhaps the wand is not indifferent, but rather waiting. Waiting for a soul strong enough to guide it towards something higher. The fact that this question is never addressed in the books is telling. J.K. Rowling gives us a world rich in magic, detail and lore, but leaves some shadows untouched, perhaps intentionally, perhaps to remind us that power, even in the magical world, is a reflection of who holds it, and that expecting morality from a wand is like expecting the quill to refuse to write lies. Still, one wonders if the next generation of witches and wizards will dare to explore this further. Will someone craft a wand that speaks back, that trembles in the hand of a liar, that glows only when used to protect? Would that be a revolution or a curse? Would wizards accept such a partner, or would they destroy it, afraid of being judged? Until then, the silence continues. Wands hum in their boxes, waiting for hands to lift them. They do not ask why, they do not care how, they serve. And in that service, they carry a secret too dangerous to voice, that magic does not save us, we must save ourselves. Number 22, why didn't Hermione restore her parents' memory on screen? Of all the sacrifices made during the Second Wizarding War, few were as personal and irreversible as the one made by Hermione Granger. In a single, quiet moment before the chaos erupted, she cast a powerful charm, Obliviate, on her own parents, erasing not only their memories of her, but altering the very fabric of their identities. The books tell us that she implanted false memories, convincing them that they were Wendell and Monica Wilkins, childless dentists, and sent them to live in Australia. It was a moment of immense courage, a sign of the weight Hermione was willing to bear in silence. And yet after the war ended and Voldemort was defeated, the story does something peculiar. It forgets them. There is no return, no reckoning, no reunion. Hermione's greatest personal sacrifice is left unresolved, like a thread cut short and never tied back into the tapestry. Throughout the Deathly Hallows, Hermione proves herself not only as a brilliant witch, but also as the emotional backbone of the trio. She carries the burden of planning, preparing, and often saving Harry and Ron from dire situations. And behind all her calm precision lies the haunting knowledge that her own family no longer knows she exists. The moment she whispers the Obliviate spell in front of the television, fading from their family photos, it symbolizes more than a spell. It is a funeral of identity. She had taken the rare step of erasing herself completely from her parents' lives, the book says, and this act hangs heavy in the air. But when peace finally returns to the wizarding world, the narrative shifts forward without revisiting the emotional wreckage left behind. The absence of resolution isn't just strange, it's deeply uncharacteristic of Hermione. She is methodical, responsible, and relentlessly loyal to those she loves. She spent hours in the Hogwarts library planning every detail of their escape, packed Mary Poppins-like bags full of magical survival tools, and even carried a supply of Polyjuice potion. The idea that she would forget or neglect to restore her parents' memories seems contradictory to her nature. If she had the strength to erase herself, surely she would have had the courage to return. And yet, no such scene is written. No mention of a spell reversed, of two parents in Australia regaining the truth of who they are. It's as though they were sealed in a vault of silence, too inconvenient for the narrative to unlock. One might argue that Hermione did return to them after the war, that the omission was simply a narrative oversight. But this explanation raises more questions than it answers. Why then was this critical moment of healing not given even a footnote? J.K. Rowling spent pages describing the most mundane things: the thickness of a book's cover, the awkward tension between Ron and Hermione, even the texture of a tense interior. But the emotional restoration of Hermione's family, an act that carries enormous thematic weight, is conspicuously absent. If, as some speculate, she reversed the charm off-screen, why wasn't it shown? If the memories were restored, how did her parents react? What were the consequences of living a life based on lies, even temporarily? The only reference to her parents after the war comes not in the original series, but in a vague post-canon interview by Rowling, where she casually mentions that Hermione brought them back. But this statement lacks detail, timing, or emotional gravity. It doesn't address whether they forgave her, whether they were horrified, whether they even remembered what had been done. It's a resolution given in passing, like an afterthought to a tragedy that deserved its own chapter. And so the wound remains open, not just for Hermione, but for readers who followed her journey and witnessed her most painful sacrifice. Hermione's story, as told in The Deathly Hallows, is one of invisibility. She erases herself not just from her parents' minds, but from the very cultural memory of the war's aftermath. While Harry receives a grand epilogue, complete with family and fanfare, and Ron is shown to be comfortably domestic, Hermione's personal closure is denied. She becomes a symbol of intellect and bravery, but her heart, the one that whispered goodbye to her mother and father, is quietly sealed away. The war ends, but for Hermione, something is never fully restored. We never see her sit at a kitchen table in Australia, never hear the words "Mum, Dad, it's me, Watts." It's possible, of course, that the spell could not be reversed. Obliviate, as known in the wizarding world, is a dangerous and often irreversible charm. Gilderoy Lockhart is a living example of its destructive power. After his own spell backfires, he forgets his entire identity and lives in long-term care, incapable of recalling anything meaningful. The idea that Hermione could reverse such a spell, especially when she admits she modified their memories so thoroughly, becomes shaky. What if the charm was permanent? What if Hermione, in her desperation, had crossed a boundary that magic couldn't undo. If this were the case, then her silence becomes a tomb. Not the result of neglect, but of shame. Perhaps she did travel to Australia, found her parents living happily as Wendell and Monica Wilkins, and realized that restoring them would mean shattering the peaceful lives she had built for them. Perhaps she stood at the edge of their dental clinic, wand in hand, unable to go through with it. If so, the tragedy becomes even deeper. Not only did she lose them once to the war, she lost them twice, by her own decision. A living grief, private and unbearable, written not in pages, but in absences. Or perhaps the silence has another explanation. Rowling didn't consider it important enough to include. This suggestion is the most unsettling of all. If true, it reflects a narrative oversight that borders on negligence. In a story so concerned with the power of love, with the cost of war, and with the restoration of what was broken, how can such a human moment be forgotten? Hermione's arc, so rich with ethical dilemmas and inner strength, is left incomplete. She is allowed to triumph in battle, but not to heal, allowed to sacrifice, but not to reclaim. There's an irony in the fact that Hermione, the character who champions justice, who once formed SPEW, to protect house elves no one else cared about, is not given the same protection by her own author. Her pain, her loss, is brushed aside. Even in the epilogue set 19 years later, there is no reference to her parents attending the train station, no hint that she reconnected with them, no sign that they are part of her new life. She is a mother now, yes, but what about being a daughter? That identity is left in limbo. This unresolved thread becomes even more jarring when compared to other characters' storylines. Harry, orphaned since infancy, is repeatedly shown longing for connection, and he receives it in various surrogate forms: Sirius, the Weasleys, even Dumbledore's memories. Ron reunites with his family and returns to familiar comfort. Neville's parents, though irreparably damaged, are acknowledged with tragic dignity. Only Hermione, who made the most rational and heartbreaking sacrifice, is left without her moment of return. The injustice is not within the story itself, but in the story's structure. The potential for storytelling was vast. A single chapter could have offered powerful catharsis. Imagine Hermione walking into her parents' office, watching their faces as recognition slowly bloomed. Imagine the emotional toll of explaining what had happened, of seeking forgiveness not for a betrayal, but for an act of love cloaked in cruelty. Imagine her father's hand shaking as he held hers again, or her mother's tears as she whispered, "I knew something was missing." That moment never comes, and in its absence, we're forced to ask, was it ever meant to? Some readers have attempted to fill the void with fan theories and headcanons. They write stories in which Hermione's parents recover their memories slowly through dreams or flashes. Others imagine her never returning, carrying that ghost with her into adulthood. But these are reader repairs for a crack that the canon never patched. And the need to fix it reflects something essential, that readers feel the missing moment even if they can't explain it. The silence isn't neutral, it's painful. What makes this absence so haunting is how it reflects the real cost of war, not just death, but the fraying of human connections. Hermione's sacrifice was deeply human, and it demanded a human resolution. Magic caused the loss, but only emotion could restore the bond. Without it, the story feels unbalanced. A war fought for love and loyalty should not end with love left unreclaimed. Hermione's parents were not just minor characters, they were the foundation of her life. Their erasure and the refusal to unerase them sends a message the series never intended, that some sacrifices must be permanent, even when healing is possible. There is one final irony. Hermione fought for truth. She demanded it from everyone, teachers, friends, enemies. She stood for moral clarity even when inconvenient. And yet her own truth remains hidden, not by choice but by omission. Her story, so complete in bravery, is incomplete in love. Perhaps this is the greatest injustice of all, that a girl who remembered everything was denied the right to be remembered by those who mattered most. Number 23. Why don't wizards fly more often? In the quiet hills of Ottery St. Catchpole, a boy once soared above the treetops, gripping the handle of his firebolt with a look of sheer exhilaration. Harry Potter, barely a teenager, felt the wind clawed his face, tasted the crisp breath of the sky, and knew a freedom he would never again experience on the ground. Yet that same boy, years later, is never again described taking to the skies. He walks, apparates, or uses the Floo network, but the broomstick, the symbol of magical liberation, vanishes from his daily life. This disappearance is not just Harry's, it is a mystery that stretches across the entire wizarding world. Why don't adult witches and wizards fly more often? In a world that bends the rules of physics and logic, the absence of air travel is a gaping inconsistency. We see them fly when they are young, inexperienced, and full of daring. The moment they age into responsibility and caution, they descend to the earth as if bound by invisible chains. During the Battle of the Seven Potters, multiple characters take to the air, including Kingsley Shacklebolt and Mad-Eye Moody. Their mission is perilous, and the skies are chaotic. The airspace above England is riddled with Death Eaters and dark spells, and for a moment the broomstick is not a toy or a sport. It is a lifeline, and yet this remains a rare instance. Even the most hardened Aurors do not use brooms as a regular form of transportation. Why? Hermione Granger, one of the brightest minds of her generation, was famously uncomfortable on a broom. In The Philosopher's Stone, she refrains from joining flying lessons and expresses clear anxiety about the lack of control. But it is not just fear that steers her away. Magic, in her view, is a tool of precision. Apparition allows her to calculate and control her destination. Flying introduces unpredictability, exposure, and reliance on external objects, elements she instinctively avoids. Still, would fear or pragmatism really stop an entire generation from flying? If brooms were so impractical, why was Harry gifted the fastest model in existence, a firebolt by Sirius Black? The firebolt's features, as described in The Prisoner of Azkaban, are phenomenal, with an oak handle, streamlined birch twigs, and goblin-made metalwork. It could reach speeds faster than the eye could follow, respond to the subtlest pressure, and maintain stability even in storm conditions. Sirius, a veteran of both war and rebellion, surely wouldn't give such a dangerous and frivolous gift if it weren't practical. It was meant to keep Harry alive. Moreover, in the Triwizard Tournament, we witness Harry's broom being summoned across long distances with the Axio charm, proving that a broomstick can follow its owner almost anywhere. This kind of flexibility is absent in other transportation methods. The night bus, while functional, is unwieldy and restricted to roads. The Floo network demands a fireplace. Apparition can be dangerous and even result in splinching. Flying offers safety, redundancy, and even visibility, which might be the very reason it's discouraged. Visibility. That word cuts through the air like a spell itself. Wizards are obsessed with secrecy. The entire foundation of their society rests upon staying hidden from Muggles. The Statute of Secrecy was enacted in 1692, and ever since, magical travel has adapted itself to the shadows. Broomsticks, soaring high above towns and cities, threaten that fragile curtain. Even with disillusionment charms or protective enchantments, the risk remains. A single sighting of a man in robes gliding across the London skyline could provoke a media frenzy or worse, a military response. Wizards do not fear flying, they fear being seen. Yet if secrecy is the answer, why then is Quidditch allowed at all? Matches involve hundreds of players and thousands of spectators, flying in coordinated formations across open fields. In the Quidditch World Cup, we learned that international games require immense magical concealment efforts. Fields are charmed, Muggle-repelling spells are cast, and sometimes memory erasing is involved. The lengths to which the Ministry goes to maintain this secrecy hint at how dangerous airborne magic can be if unregulated. Perhaps flying is not merely discouraged, it is legislatively constrained. Arthur Weasley works at the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office and shows deep fascination with how Muggles get by without magic. He owns a flying car, an invention so dangerous that when it appears in the skies above London, it causes a near catastrophe. The Ministry reacts with fury not because of the car itself, but because it was seen. When Harry and Ron crash the Ford Anglia into the Whomping Willow, it leads to a full investigation. This sets a precedent. Airborne, magical objects attract attention, and attention is dangerous. Even within wizarding strongholds, flying seems subdued. At Hogwarts, first years are taught to fly, but never again are they instructed or tested on it. Flying is a one-time skill, not a lifelong method of transport. Hogwarts, with its towers and battlements, should be a city of verticality, but students walk everywhere. Teachers, too, are rarely seen on broomsticks. Dumbledore himself, the most powerful wizard of the age, never flies, not when travelling to the Ministry, not when rescuing Harry, not even in battle. He apparates, uses portkeys, or travels by Thestral-drawn carriage. The sky remains strangely empty. One might argue that flying is impractical for long distances, but again, the canon contradicts this. In Order of the Phoenix, members of the advance guard fly brooms from Little Whinging to Grimmauld Place. They do it with stealth, endurance, and coordination. The trip is not only possible, it is routine. Mundungus Fletcher, Tonks and Lupin, none of whom are elite flyers, manage it without incident. This means that flying is viable for adults even over metropolitan areas if precautions are taken. So why isn't it done more? There's also the question of delivery and logistics. Why, in a world that can fly, does the owl remain the dominant postal system? In the Philosopher's Stone, hundreds of owls deliver letters to Harry, swarming Privet Drive like a magical plague. The inefficiency is staggering. A single wizard with a broom could have dropped the letter on the doorstep. In fact, in The Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore visits the Dursleys and hands Harry a letter personally. He apparates, but one wonders, why not send a courier by air? Is it nostalgia or something deeper? The scarcity of magical aerial infrastructure is also telling. There are no flying lanes, no traffic systems, no air patrols, no wizarding equivalent of aircraft hangars or air traffic controllers. Flying is treated not as a tool of society, but as a remnant of childhood. Even magical law enforcement, like the Auras, avoid the skies. In Deathly Hallows, when the Ministry is controlled by Death Eaters, they still do not exploit airborne patrols. Surveillance and control remain earthbound. Psychological factors might also play a role. In The Order of the Phoenix, Harry describes the sensation of flying as a rare joy. It was the only thing that made him forget everything else. Flying is escapism. It is unburdened by consequence, unchained from logic. For adults who are mired in bureaucracy and secrecy, this kind of joy might be seen as indulgent, even dangerous. The wizarding world, for all its magic, is deeply conservative. It clings to tradition and fears disruption. Flying is, at its core, a disruptive act. There is also a spiritual component to consider. Broomsticks are not neutral tools. They are personal, almost totemic objects. The Nimbus 2000, the Firebolt, the Clean Sweep, these are not mass transit vehicles. They are extensions of identity. To ride one is to become vulnerable, exposed, unshielded by architecture or enchantment. Perhaps this is why adult wizards avoid them. Power in the magical world often manifests as control over time, space, knowledge. Flying relinquishes that control to the elements. The lack of magical public air transportation is perhaps the most damning gap. In the Night Bus, we see that magical transportation can be chaotic but effective. The bus bends reality, dodges traffic, and stops for any wizard in need. Why hasn't this concept been adapted to the skies? A flying barge, a sky carriage system, even enchanted platforms could have revolutionized transport. That none of this exists implies either technological stagnation or institutional suppression. We must also remember the role of fear. In Half-Blood Prince, when Death Eaters infiltrate the Ministry, No one escapes on a broom. When the Battle of Hogwarts begins, the skies remain still. Only in chaos do brooms emerge, and even then, only for the few who dare. It is as if the wizarding world has decided, consciously or not, to ground itself, to root its magic in walls, tunnels and passageways. The sky, vast and open, represents exposure, and exposure represents vulnerability. Even children are subtly taught that flying is temporary. Harry, the Seeker, graduates from Hogwarts and never rides a broom again. He becomes an auror, a father, a bureaucrat. The boy who once danced with the clouds becomes a man of corridors and files. The metaphor is almost painful. Flying is not just neglected, it is abandoned. And in that abandonment lies a fear not just of Muggles, but of freedom itself. There are hints, too, that brooms carry emotional consequences. In Goblet of Fire, Victor Crumb is a Quidditch legend, yet his mood is sombre, his joy muted. The sport, it seems, has drained him. Even Harry grows tired of the broom after years of tournaments and perilous chases. Perhaps flight, like fame or youth, is a gift that curdles over time. What once offered joy now delivers only pressure. It's worth asking whether the Ministry has quietly engineered this shift. If the skies were once filled with broomsticks, why are they now so empty? Perhaps there was a time, before the wars, before Voldemort, when flying was common. But secrets are easier kept in the shadows. A populace that walks is a populace that obeys. Flight inspires rebellion, imagination, escape. The Ministry may never have outlawed flying. They simply made it irrelevant. The wizarding world is a place of immense wonder but profound limits. It stretches the imagination and then pulls it back with fear. Flying, in its purity, defies those limits. It is an act of visible magic in an invisible world, and that may be why it has been left behind, not because it is impractical, but because it is dangerous to the very illusion that keeps their world hidden. Flying is power on display, and power on display invites challenge. Until the wizarding world dares to rise above secrecy, until it accepts the sky as a domain of truth rather than danger, the broomstick will remain a relic. It will hang on walls, rest in museum cases, or wait for the hands of children, for in the end, flight belongs not to the powerful but to the free. Number 24. Why isn't the mirror of Erised used in battle? In the quiet chill of a forgotten classroom at Hogwarts, behind a veil of dust and cobwebs, stood one of the most powerful magical artifacts known to wizardkind, a relic so curious and dangerous that even Albus Dumbledore, who had faced Grindelwald and held the Elder Wand, chose not to destroy it, but to hide it. The mirror of Erised, or analyses, as it appears in the Russian phonetic reflection of desire, shows not the face of the onlooker, but their deepest, most vulnerable longing, and yet for all its power it is curiously absent from the great battles of the wizarding world. It was never deployed against Lord Voldemort, never used in the Department of Mysteries, never even mentioned in strategic discussions by the Bite. Order of the Phoenix. This silence is a mystery unto itself, perhaps more haunting than what the mirror reveals. Harry Potter, barely 12, stumbled upon the mirror while wandering the corridors under his invisibility cloak. In the dead of night, with only the icy stone floor beneath him and the soft glow of starlight through broken glass, he found not his own image in the mirror, but that of his parents, Lily, with eyes as green as his own, and James, standing proud and smiling. They looked back at him, not with judgment, not with warning, but with infinite love, and Harry, orphaned and isolated, returned to the mirror again and again. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He sat cross-legged before the glass, letting the warmth of illusion wash over him. This was not mere reflection. It was enchantment of the mind, the soul, an enchantment so deep it frightened Dumbledore into secrecy. The headmaster later admitted, "Men have wasted away before it, not knowing if what they have seen is real or even possible." That was not hyperbole. The mirror had the power to override the will, to suspend judgment, to bend the spirit. Dumbledore, with all his knowledge, buried it in the forbidden chamber on the 3rd floor, later using it to hide the Philosopher's Stone. But once the stone was destroyed, the mirror vanished again, swallowed by the castle's endless passageways. And in a war where every weapon counted, where ancient runes were dusted off and forbidden curses hurled in desperation, the mirror of Erised was not summoned. One would expect the Order of the Phoenix, the resistance against Voldemort's reign of terror, to at least consider its use. They employed enchanted coins for communication, a literal phoenix as a messenger, and placed their hopes in a prophecy. They infiltrated the Ministry, broke into Azkaban, and smuggled Muggle-borns across borders. But not once did they wheel out the mirror, not even when they had to distract a Death Eater, not even to weaken a possessed soul. Did Dumbledore warn them? Did he lock it away with a charm so ancient not even Sirius Black or Kingsley Shacklebolt could retrieve it? The mirror could have served as a trap. Consider Bellatrix Lestrange, whose soul pulsed with devotion to Voldemort. What would she see in the mirror's reflection? Power? Her Dark Lord at her side, triumphant? And would that vision consume her as it consumed Harry? Would she stand paralyzed in her delusion, vulnerable to attack, a tear trailing down her fanatical cheek? A spell is cast and deflected, but a desire fulfilled in illusion, that strikes at the core, and yet no such tactic was ever attempted. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the mirror is that it does not simply show, it seduces. Harry, even after Dumbledore's warning, even after knowing it was a lie, longed to return. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live, Dumbledore had said. But what if the mirror could do more than display? What if, over time, it shaped reality itself, subtly, dangerously, feeding on longing until it twisted fate? What if it was never just a mirror, but a dormant magical entity, capable of bending probability in alignment with the heart's craving? Consider the story of Merope Gaunt, Voldemort's mother, a woman consumed by hopeless love, armed with a magical locket and desperate intent. Had she gazed into the mirror of Erised, would it have shown her a family, a happy home, a child who loved her? And if so, would that longing have turned her into a prisoner of her own reflection, or would the mirror have fed her illusion until it bled into reality? Would her choices have changed, her destiny rerouted, the horror of Tom Riddle avoided altogether? The mirror's silence in this moment of history is not just peculiar, it is damning. Dumbledore once confessed to Harry that he too saw his family in the mirror. Not power, not glory, but "I see myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks," he said, though this was later revealed to be a half-truth. What he likely saw was reconciliation, perhaps his sister Ariana alive, his brother Aberforth forgiving him. But if Dumbledore, the master of secrets, kept the mirror hidden even from the Order, it suggests he feared more than obsession. He feared discovery. There's a theory among scholars of magical artifacts that the mirror of Erised is not a simple tool, but a fragment of ancient magic lost to time, a prototype from the era of the Founders, perhaps even touched by Salazar Slytherin or Rowena Ravenclaw. Objects created with raw emotion in mind tend to become unstable. The mirror is not bound by spells alone. It feeds on sentiment, and perhaps the longer one stares, the more it reflects not what is, but what could be. If Voldemort had seen it, what might it have shown? A world enslaved, himself as eternal? Or perhaps the boy he once was, alone, unloved, desperate? Would it have enraged him or broken him? The Ministry of Magic, which catalogued and regulated every artifact in the Department of Mysteries, never made a formal inquiry into the mirror. There were no records, no public studies, no orders to secure it. It was as if the artifact never existed. Even Dolores Umbridge, who revelled in controlling knowledge, did not list it among her confiscations. Was this bureaucratic oversight or a deeper enchantment? Did the mirror perhaps conceal itself from the minds of those unworthy to understand it? The lack of mention in Tom Riddle's years at Hogwarts is equally strange. A boy so obsessed with magical relics that he hunted down the diadem of Ravenclaw, created Horcruxes, and stole the locket of Slytherin, never sought out the mirror of Erised. He lived within the very walls where it once stood. Either he never knew of it, or, more chillingly, he did, and rejected it. Perhaps he looked into its depths and saw something he could not bear. Perhaps it showed him his own soul, fractured and empty, and he turned away in terror. There's also the question of whether the mirror could have revealed the locations of Horcruxes. If it truly shows what the heart desires most, and if that desire is to destroy Voldemort, then wouldn't it offer the seeker a vision of success? Could it have hinted at a locket in a sea cave, a diadem in the room of requirement? Harry, who had a piece of Voldemort's soul within him, might have found direction through the mirror, if not literal, then emotional. But again, the opportunity was passed over. The most damning silence is during the Battle of Hogwarts, a conflict so intense that statues were summoned to life, protective enchantments layered like armor, and the very dead walked the halls. Yet no one summoned the mirror of Erised to distract the enemy. No one lured Death Eaters into a room filled with false triumph. It would have taken nothing to hide the mirror behind a veil of smoke or glamour, catching the eye of an advancing warrior, halting them in awe. And yet it remained absent. Aberforth Dumbledore, who possessed a two-way mirror shard once used to communicate with Sirius, made no mention of his brother's other mirror. Even when he offered Harry sanctuary, food, information, he never once spoke of the Erised artifact. Was this omission due to ignorance or deliberate evasion? Perhaps Dumbledore had confided in no one. Perhaps the mirror's full potential was a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. The possibility that the mirror does more than reflect is not mere speculation. In the first book, when Harry sees the Philosopher's Stone in the mirror, it actually appears in his pocket. Only one who wanted to find the stone, find it, but not use it, would be able to get it, Dumbledore explained. This implies the mirror can manifest physical outcomes based on intent, a tool of manifestation, not illusion. And if that is true, then its power is on par with the most dangerous magical devices in existence, more dangerous even than the Hallows. If it can give the stone, can it give other things? Can it grant the illusion of family, so real the mind cannot reject it? Can it create emotional bonds so deep they overwrite reality? Could it be used to fabricate peace during interrogation, lulling prisoners into confession through the fantasy of release? The mind reels at the applications, yet none are explored, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of reverence, or perhaps because the mirror, in its ancient magic, chooses not to obey. Hermione Granger, the brightest witch of her age, never analysed the mirror. She studied time-turners, polyjuice, even the restricted section's darkest spells. But she too said nothing. This silence, especially from someone so hungry for knowledge, is telling. Maybe she, like Dumbledore, feared what she might see, or feared that her desires might overwhelm her reason. Perhaps the mirror is not just a tool, it is a test. There is also the question of legacy. After the war, after Voldemort's fall and the ashes cooled, where did the mirror go? Was it returned to the room of requirement, locked in the headmaster's office, buried in the Forbidden Forest? No mention is ever made, no catalogue entry, no exhibit, no record. It slips away once again into the shadows like a ghost too powerful to contain. One cannot help but wonder if Dumbledore never intended for it to be used in battle, not because it lacked utility, but because its use would demand a price no wizard was willing to pay. Number 25. Why can some wizards do wandless magic? Of all the mysteries buried in the world of Harry Potter, one stands apart as both haunting and profoundly unexplained. Why do some witches and wizards perform magic without wands, while others remain bound to them as if they were lifelines? In a universe where the wand is exalted as an extension of the wizard's will, where the wand chooses the wizard as Ollivander so solemnly declared, how is it that magic, raw and unfiltered, erupts without guidance, control, or incantation? The canon offers no rulebook, only scattered, shimmering fragments, but within those fragments lie questions too compelling to ignore. Harry Potter himself is our first witness to this riddle. Before ever holding a wand, before hearing the word Hogwarts, he makes the glass at the zoo vanish. One moment the python is behind a barrier, the next Dudley is falling into an empty pit. Harry doesn't know how he did it. There is no incantation, no gesture, just a surge of emotion, anger, perhaps embarrassment, and a fierce wish for escape. The event is later brushed off as a symptom of uncontrolled magic in children. But what is this uncontrolled magic really, or why does it not require a conduit like a wand? And more importantly, why do some adults long past childhood still channel magic in such a primal way? Consider Albus Dumbledore at the Ministry of Magic in Order of the Phoenix. Surrounded by enemies and betrayal, he vanishes with Fawkes in a burst of flames. He neither lifts his wand nor utters a spell. The Aurors stand stunned, their drawn wands useless. Kingsley murmurs, "You may not like him, Minister, but you can't deny Dumbledore's got style." But what style is this? Apparition without a wand, without words, with absolute grace. Why teach wand-dependent apparition classes at Hogwarts if the greatest wizard alive can do it instinctively? Then there's Lord Voldemort, risen from the dead in Goblet of Fire. During the resurrection ritual, he is wandless. He has no body, let alone a hand to hold anything, and yet he commands the cauldron's contents, levitates objects, and eventually wraps the very fabric of reality to reform himself. Later, when dueling, he is often seen flicking fingers or narrowing eyes to send ripples through the world around him. In Deathly Hallows, when he murders the German family during the hunt for the Elder Wand, his magic appears effortless, sometimes silent. No wand gestures are described, no incantations are mentioned. What gives him this power? In contrast, the average Hogwarts student struggles to levitate a feather without the precise swish and flick. Professor Flitwick insists on exact pronunciations, even correcting the Wingardium Leviosa misstep that Hermione famously rectifies. So how is it that the highest tier of magical practitioners seem to graduate from the very laws that govern the rest of their world? The curriculum never touches upon wandless or wordless magic, except as a theoretical concept, and always in vague, unattainable terms. The answer is not in any textbook, Hogwarts. A history is silent. Even the standard book of spells offers no clue. What we are left with is an unspoken hierarchy of magical ability, one that suggests that true magic is not democratic. It is not a science to be learned. It is an inheritance, perhaps even a curse. The magic Harry uses at the zoo feels instinctual, rooted in emotion. So does the accidental inflation of Aunt Marge in Prisoner of Azkaban. There is no wand involved, only fury, only shame, only desperate desire. But if powerful magic can be born of emotion, why is the system built around wands and spells? Why do students spend 7 years mastering technique when some witches and wizards appear to master magic with little more than a thought? The curriculum at Hogwarts is deeply structured. Incantations, wand movements, discipline. Everything depends on tools. Even exams are performed under the supervision of the Ministry. There is no room for improvisation. No class ever teaches a student how to tap into their innate power, the way Harry or Voldemort seems to do unconsciously. Dumbledore, again, proves to be an exception. In Half-Blood Prince, when Harry and Dumbledore confront the Inferi in the cave, Dumbledore lights the chamber with a towering ring of fire. There is no mention of a wand. The fire encircles them, responding to his presence alone. Dumbledore looks calm, not commanding, more like a vessel than a conductor. Is this magic innate, or has he unlocked something forbidden? What kind of training or trauma leads to this state of magical being? There is another eerie example. In Chamber of Secrets, young Tom Riddle speaks to Professor Dippet about staying at Hogwarts. His voice is polite, persuasive, but his aura holds power. Later, in the orphanage memory, Dumbledore sees the boy commanding objects around the room without touching them. He causes pain with his mind. He understands fear before understanding ethics. His magic manifests before any wand ever chooses him. In a way, Riddle never needed the wand. He only needed an excuse to use it. This pattern continues across powerful characters. Bellatrix Lestrange kills Sirius Black with what appears to be a casual spell, cast with laughter rather than formality. When she tortures Hermione, we are not told whether the Cruciatus curse is spoken or silent. Her power feels instinctual, twisted, even intimate. She is a reminder that magic can be as much about emotion as education. Hatred, in particular, fuels it. If hatred can empower wandless magic, can love do the same? Lily Potter's Sacrifice, invoking ancient wandless protection, is among the oldest spells in the book, yet never taught. Dumbledore refers to it as a deep magic, something older than language. When Voldemort tries to kill Harry in Philosopher's Stone, the spell rebounds, not because of a wand, but because of a mother's will. This is the only time we see love wielded as a weapon, and it works. So why, then, does Hogwarts ignore this realm? Why do its teachers behave as if structured wand-based magic is the only legitimate form? Perhaps because wand magic can be monitored, standardized, licensed. The Ministry of Magic requires wands to register spells. They assign auras based on wand performance. They control magic by forcing it into measurable channels. A world where magic is free, emotion-driven, internal, raw, would be ungovernable. And maybe that's the point. Perhaps wandless magic is not taught because it cannot be taught, or worse, because it cannot be controlled. The few who possess it are either heroes or monsters. Dumbledore and Voldemort stand on opposite ends of a spectrum, yet both have shed their dependence on tools. They are defined not by how they cast spells, but by who they are when they cast them, and that, more than any wand, defines their destiny. It is worth noting that Snape, the most precise spellcaster in the books, rarely exhibits wandless ability. His power lies in refinement, creating the Sectum Sempra spell, brewing perfect potions, masking his thoughts. Yet he remains bound to the wand. When he dies, it is not his mind or soul that fails him, but the crude mechanics of a snake's bite. If he had been able to summon wandless protection, would he have lived? Or is wandless magic not just about power, but about intent? Wandless magic seems tied to identity, to emotion, to purity of purpose. Harry does not make glass vanish because he knows how. He does it because he needs to. Dumbledore does not create fire because he studied it. He does it because he believes it. Voldemort rises from death not because he planned it, but because he willed it. These are not mere tricks, they are manifestations of self. Which raises a darker question. What happens to those who never unlock this magic? Are they lesser, or are they safer? The wand exists to bridge the gap between man and magic, to keep dangerous forces in check. But those who no longer need the bridge, what are they becoming? Wizards, or something else entirely? The wand may choose the wizard, but the deeper truth is more ancient. Magic chooses the soul. Wands are merely fences built around wild gardens. Most students never peek over those fences, but a few, chosen by destiny or cursed by it, leap beyond into the unknown. There, wandless and unbound, they become something beyond classification, something the wizarding world fears to understand. In the end, the absence of explanation in the canon may not be a flaw, but a whisper of something too great for rules. A suggestion that magic, in its purest form, does not follow syllables and gestures, but feeling, hunger, protection, love, power, and those who command it without wands are not following a path, they are creating it, one step, one thought, one unspeakable will, at a time. Number 26. Why can so few people see Thestrals? Of all the magical creatures roaming the pages of the Harry Potter universe, none carry the same spectral weight as the Thestrals. Winged and skeletal, these black, bat-like horses are visible only to those who have witnessed death and, as the books specify, truly understood it. And yet this very condition, the understanding of death, raises questions that seem to reach beyond the edges of logical consistency. Why is it that Harry, who saw his own mother killed before his eyes as a baby, couldn't see the Thestrals when he first arrived at Hogwarts? Why does their ghastly presence only reveal itself after Cedric Diggory's death in the 4th book? The official explanation is that he came to terms with death only then, but the notion seems nebulous. Are Thestrals real physical beings, or are they illusions, projections of grief in magical form? This mystery lingers like fog on the forbidden forest's edge. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the Thestrals pull the carriages that carry students to Hogwarts. They have always done so. Yet, in Sorcerer's Stone, Harry sees nothing pulling his carriage. Nothing was pulling the carriages, Rowling writes. They were moving by themselves. That description lingers in the minds of attentive readers. Harry had seen death, had felt its cold breath, long before Cedric's murder. He witnessed his mother die, he heard her last scream, he saw green light flash before everything was lost. Why, then, was this not enough? The books answer that Thestrals become visible only when a person both sees death and emotionally comprehends it. According to Luna Lovegood, "You're just as sane as I am." She tells Harry this to comfort him, implying that seeing Thestrals is not a sign of madness, but of deep awareness. Luna had seen her mother die when she was just 9 years old. The moment was traumatic, but her grief was real and processed. For Harry, the argument goes, the memory of Lily's death was shrouded in infancy, emotionally disconnected from his conscious mind. This explanation, however, is more poetic than rational. There is something unsatisfyingly vague in the idea that visibility of a magical creature depends not on fact but on feeling. It creates a grey area where magic stops being consistent and becomes philosophical. Thestrals are said to be real enough to be bred, ridden, and even trained by Hagrid. Harry flies one to the Ministry of Magic, but if they are physical creatures, visible only to a select few, are they not then objectively real? Why would the laws of perception dictate their presence? There is no other creature in the series whose existence is so deeply entwined with emotional experience. Perhaps the most revealing part of the mystery lies in what is never said. There is no canonical instance of someone seeing Thestrals too early, no record of a child under 10 traumatized by war or loss, suddenly pointing to invisible wings. Not one case of a younger student at Hogwarts trembling as skeletal forms appear beside the carriages. The Thestrals seem to obey an unspoken rule. They arrive only when the soul is ripe for understanding. This makes them less like creatures and more like omens, like walking metaphors, summoned not by biology but by inner transformation. Consider Neville Longbottom. His parents were tortured into madness by Bellatrix Lestrange, yet he does not see Thestrals. The books suggest he was not present at their deaths, that he never witnessed their literal dying, but he has lived with the emotional death of his parents every day. He visits them in St. Mungo's, he sees their empty stairs. Does this not count as witnessing the end of a person? The ambiguity lies not in death, but in Rowling's chosen threshold for it. What is this moment of understanding, and who decides its terms? Rowling has offered some justification. In interviews, she explained that seeing death and understanding it are two separate things, and that Harry's infant memory of Lily's death was insufficient for Thestral vision. It wasn't until he saw Cedric's lifeless body and grappled with the horror, guilt, and helplessness that the creatures emerged from the shadows. But even so, the question remains, why construct a creature whose existence depends on subjective internal change? It is as if the Thestrals are not creatures at all, but spiritual mirrors. They are tied not to the corpse, but to the conscience. They do not respond to death's fact, but to its feeling. They arrive when a person passes an invisible threshold, when their heart touches the edge of the void and returns altered. This lends itself more to symbolism than magical taxonomy. If a creature exists only for those transformed by grief, is it not a spell wearing a mask? Take the example of Draco Malfoy. Arrogant, entitled, and exposed to dark magic from a young age, Draco was no stranger to death. His father was a Death Eater. His family served Voldemort. By the end of the 6th book, Draco witnesses the death of Dumbledore. It is a defining moment. But there is never a mention of Draco seeing Thestrals. Does this mean he did not understand death, or does it mean that Rowling only allows Thestrals to appear to certain chosen souls, those deemed ready by narrative design? This inconsistency becomes starker when we remember that even Hermione Granger, brilliant and emotionally sensitive, never sees Thestrals. She witnesses death multiple times. In the final battle of Hogwarts, she sees people fall. But the text offers no indication that she ever perceives the black-winged horses. One might argue that her logic-based mind resists the emotional surrender needed for Thestral vision, but if that's true, we've moved from a magical condition to a philosophical personality test. Another anomaly emerges in Order of the Phoenix. When Harry first sees the Thestrals, he is disturbed by their appearance. He tries to describe them, but Ron and Hermione see nothing. Luna steps in and identifies them. Her tone is calm, her knowledge personal. "They're called Thestrals," she says. "They're quite gentle, really." That moment is powerful, but it also reveals something curious. If Thestrals are visible only to the grief-touched, then Luna's early encounter with death is not unique. So where are the others? Hundreds of students pass through Hogwarts over generations. Many must have lost siblings, parents, friends. Are we to believe that only a small handful have ever reached that fateful understanding? If so, what does that say about the magical community? Are young witches and wizards protected from death by some unwritten law? Or is Rowling selectively revealing the Thestral seers to fit a symbolic theme? Dumbledore surely must see Thestrals. He has watched countless people die, family, friends, students, allies. The death of his sister Ariana haunted him for decades, and yet Dumbledore never comments on the Thestrals. He never mentions them to Harry, never references their meaning. His silence may be a literary choice, but it also deepens the mystery. Are Thestrals meant to be acknowledged, or are they meant to haunt in silence? The nature of Thestrals begins to resemble a magical threshold, like the Mirror of Erised or the Resurrection Stone. They are a bridge between life and the concept of death. They do not exist for the sake of transportation. They exist to mark those who have crossed into another kind of seeing. The fact that they can be touched, fed, and flown suggests they are real, but their selective visibility renders them semiotic ghosts.